urban explorers of Reddit. What is your creepiest experience? Story 1. Went to a closed-up mental hospital in my city with some friends at night. Everything was cool until we got to the basement, where there were 5-meter wide and 4-meter high lit tunnels going far in both directions. We headed down one end and found a huge active generator. Then we went the other way, and as we were about to hit another intersection, we saw two men wearing full green attire and face masks walking at the end of one of the corridors at 2 a.m. We got out of there real quick. Story 2. Exploring an abandoned construction site. It's a site out in redneck country that's got a bunch of old construction vehicles getting overgrown with plants and my GF, and I decided to go check it out and see what it's all about. We look around and don't see a whole lot. It's about to rain, so we decide to head out. As we are getting in my car, my girlfriend freezes and says, "There's a guy in the woods watching us." I crap myself and ask if she's sure. She repeats herself and says he saw her see him and laid flat on the ground to hide himself. Noped out of there real quick. Story 3. My friends and I used to explore this old factory processing plant. No idea what it was originally. Anyway, it had lots of underground sections that were pitch black, even a couple of meters from the entrance, but which also required going down a flight of stairs. One time we found a burned out car 2-3 levels down. No idea how it got in there, but that was kinda creepy. Another time we found a hole. We didn't bring torches, flashlights, with us because we're idiots, but we had lighters and were trying to figure out what the hole was, or if it could lead anywhere. We put a stick in there, and it ended up being at least 6 feet deep, but we also learned that it was full of some liquid, and if we had fallen in, it could have easily drowned in the dark. Another time we went a couple of levels down, and one of us at the bottom started screaming shrieks of absolute terror, and the rest of us thought we were all going to be murdered. We all started running. Everyone was screaming at this point. There was this sludgy crap on the ground, and some of us slipped and fell, just like in a goddamn horror movie, slipping and sliding, our limbs out of control. Again, there's 6+ people screaming bloody murder with absolute fear and terror on their faces, so we all thought we were going to get murdered. Turned out a bird had made a nest down there, and my sister got spooked, and my friend screamed like a kid. Story 4. I was exploring a certain abandoned mill near a large city on the coast with a friend. We snuck in, messed around a bit, and realized that we only had one flashlight. Took turns, weird noises, dark inside because there was no power, evidence of homeless occupation, and empty needles. Real horror game material. We come up the stairway and turn a corner. Ahead is a walkway bridge, aka the way to the rest of the building. To the right is a pitch black room that doesn't feel very nice. As we walk towards the bridge, the flashlight picks out a sign that says, "To Hell," and points towards this dark room. We didn't go in. Didn't feel right. Story 5. Last winter, I went into this abandoned parking lot under a closed shopping mall. It had 2 levels. The upper level had a bit of sunlight going in through the windows, but the lower level was pitch black. I made my way down this wide ramp that the cars would use, and I decided to have a look at the bottom level. After turning my flashlight on, I noticed that the space was huge, much bigger than the upper level. I remember how the light danced through the many supporting pillars and cast vivid shadows. I said, "Hello," and "I'm just taking a look around," just to make my intentions clear, but was met with no response. So I decided to walk around for a bit, but couldn't see anything of interest. Just a lot of junk, some empty old bottles, but nothing that might indicate someone living or hanging around there. The place seemed completely abandoned, however. This uneasy feeling that someone might be hiding in the pitch-black shadow of one of those pillars took the better of me, and I climbed back up the ramp. I left taking a different route and passed under an overhead clearing that snow had fallen through. Just as I was about to hop the fence and leave, I noticed that the patch of snow that had formed had footprints in it. I know this doesn't really sound terrifying when you read it, as the logical explanation was that some poor chap had probably taken shelter from the cold inside the lot, but still, being there creeped the hell out of me. Story 6. I had one creepy experience I already told, but my friends who always go exploring told me about this time they were just following a trail that went into the hills, and after almost reaching the freeway, they ended up near an old closed-up train tunnel. They were able to squeeze through some loose fencing, and after wandering through with nothing of interest, they eventually came to a bunch of shipping containers. They told me that when they glanced inside, they saw a ton of guns and ammo in one, and just a crap ton of heavy boxes in the rest. After a few minutes of checking it out, they heard voices from further down the tunnel coming closer, so they got out of there. They also said it almost smelled like the ocean towards the end, so the tunnel might have led out near the beach. Edit update. Some added clarification for those who asked. The place they hiked to was somewhere between Santa Barbara and Oxnard in California, as they stopped on the 101 going southbound and started their hike and ended up returning to the car and going to Oxnard at the end of the day. They made a report to the police, but I haven't heard of anything coming of that on the news or otherwise. Also, some people said it might be smugglers, but given that the crates were unlocked, the tunnel was unguarded, and it was accessible to anyone who wandered out there, I doubt that's the case. If it was, they were either just about to take off, or they were really stupid. Story 7. Nothing big, but I was once exploring a drainage tunnel with friends. We were pretty deep inside of it, and turned a corner to see someone leaning against the wall with a hat on. It ended up being a sandbag. Someone dressed up but scared the hell out of me because it was pretty deep in there. There were pants and shoes and a jacket with a hat on it. I don't know what they did to make the jeans look like legs, 'cause I didn't touch it or go back. A friend of mine went back and told me it was a sandbag and I was already done for the day. Story 8. I used to be really big into urban exploring when I was younger. After I got older, I hitchhiked across the USA multiple times and stayed on the road for a little over 3 years. One of the most memorable experiences, south of Omaha, I and 4 other hippies made camp at night in a field of weeds next to a railroad track. We woke up in the morning around 6 a.m. and one of the guys was like, "Do you smell that? Smells like kush." We all were like, sure, go back to sleep. But then another guy was like, "Holy cow, it does smell like kush." Annoyed, I get out of bed, get up, and grab my flashlight. I shine it around, and notice all the plants around us look sticky. Intrigued, I get closer and realize we are camped in the middle of someone's guerrilla growth patch of MJ. Sure enough, we all got up and started looking around and even found very well hidden water lines, barbed wire, etc. We started to think about grabbing some of it and taking it with us, but then we heard a gunshot far off and we all froze. Immediately after, we heard dogs barking and the sound of someone moving through the field. We started to rationalize that it was just someone hunting, but then there was another gunshot, and it was much closer than the first. Suffice it to say, we grabbed our things and ran down the tracks, half of us barely clothed. Luckily, you did not get hurt. I have read that the most injuries and deaths from booby traps are usually around illegal marijuana grows. Story 9. I've got a few. Scary, but not creepy scary. We were exploring an old power plant. I was going into the control room while my friend continued down the hall. Suddenly, a part of the building collapsed. I immediately assumed something happened to my friend. The man was glad when I saw he was unharmed. The collapsed part. While exploring an abandoned steel factory, we went around the corner into the next hallway when we came face to face with what appeared to be a security guard. Creep. At first, my heart dropped until I saw it was only a dummy. The Dummy Story 10. When I was in college, a few friends and I went to this local abandoned hotel. It was a swanky place back in the 50s, but had just been sitting around abandoned and fenced off ever since. We walked by and saw an open window on a second-story ledge and ended up finding an old wooden ladder nearby on the property. We went in and hung around and saw a bit of great graffiti. The whole place was trashed with actual garbage, as well as bits of the building that were falling apart. We made it up the staircase to the third floor, looking in each of the rooms. The area we were in used to be the housing for the staff of the hotel. The third floor was covered in garbage from throughout the years. We got to the last room on the third floor and looked in to find a lit candle with no one else around. Realizing we were not alone, we booked it out of there, and once we were outside, looked up to see someone watching us from one of the windows. Now we went to college in a city with a significant homeless problem and assumed we had just stumbled onto someone's home, but still freaked us out. They cemented up the place after another explorer fell down an open elevator shaft and broke his legs, and it has recently been renovated and they are turning it into an apartment building. Not the creepiest find, but definitely freaked us out at the moment. Story 11. Not urbex. Rural exploration, I suppose you could call it. I was working on a project for a photography project, and there was a massive forest up a mountain near where I live. Said forest contains an abandoned hospital that was shut down after an unexplained death. No, I am not joking. So, it's a bad day, weather-wise. I'm in the woods with a camera and a packed lunch, ready to go a-wandering. After a few hours, I found a small camp with some abandoned tools, including a massive bolt cutter. Someone had tried to destroy them in a fire, but that was a no-go. Maybe 200-300 meters away, I found a burned-out car. Not an uncommon sight in the area. Kids buy super crappy, clapped-out bangers and trash them up there. Not far away, about running distance, I found a pair of women's jeans, and a little bit further away from that, maybe 5 meters or so, there was a pair of panties, hanging off a low branch. They'd clearly been there for a while. I'm not sure how long underwear would last exposed to Irish weather, and these were right out in the open, but a few weeks maybe? Pretty creepy, finding all that, all alone in the woods. I flipped through local news for anything on any break-ins or assaults or anything suspicious, and couldn't find anything that had happened recently. I did contact the police, but they pretty much told me it was just littering, with no actual evidence of any wrongdoing. Story 12. Rural area. Landscape photography. Happens upon a long abandoned house and sets up to snap a few images. Look in the window. It is perfectly furnished. Piano, with music open. Fishing gear. Wood stove with firewood nearby. Magazines on coffee table. Jackets on coat rack. Roll-top desk. Open with neatly stacked papers. Family photos. Small kitchen table with red top and matching chairs, and one is pulled out. It was all covered in inches of dust. It looked like someone walked out in 1950 and never returned. Story 13. I went to Bachelor's Grove Cemetery in Illinois with some friends during the day, and if it's still open, you should go. We didn't know the stories, but a few ghost hunters had their gear and told us different versions of the same tales of how the nearby pond was a dump for bodies and stuff like that. Classic graveyard. A photographer gave us the closest thing to the real story and said that he came there a lot for goth girl shoots and to get stock spooky photos. He never saw anything scary, but at night high school kids would come and party, and sometimes weirdos would come and hurt animals, but that hadn't happened in years. We came back at night and saw some older kids slinking in with coolers and backpacks, so we started chatting with them. We got the cold shoulder, but we were theater kids and just bounced from group to group trying to break the ice till one of the ringleader types unzipped his book bag, showed us what looked like a robe, and said, "You need to leave." No idea if it was something culty or if he showed me his picnic blanket and didn't want to share his bruise, but it worked. We noped out. Story 14. A group of my friends and I explored an abandoned Asylum mental hospital a couple of years ago in the Oklahoma metro, very unsafe at night for silly college freshmen like ourselves. The first experience we had was all of us taking our merry time, enjoying the darkness and generally messing around. You have to come in through a broken window, and we were all gathered at the window, just being dumb, when we heard loud, echoing footsteps down the hall running towards us. We all did that. Who the heck is in here? Who's messing with us? Look and turn, and after realizing we're all present, and none of us are sprinting down a dark abandoned hallway, booted out of there. The second time, we could hear a group of people messing with us, jumping from around corners and such, but they never got too close. We assumed it was an animal at first, but got brave and realized it was a person. We managed to catch them, and after staring at a collection of seemingly drugged-up 20-somethings who begged us for cans of paint and cigarettes, we got the not-so-good vibes, finally you say, and tried to leave. The leader of the haunted asylum cronies asked if we had jewelry, which we denied. He then said the creepiest thing I've heard in my life. I like jewelry. I take it off the girls here when they sleep. We f***ing bolted. Story 15. My boarding school was located about a mile up a dirt road from an abandoned insane asylum in the woods of New Hampshire. A group of us snuck up there a few times. The whole place just felt super creepy and haunted, with abandoned gear everywhere. Very unsettling. Some of us found an old film projector with a promo video reel there one time. The host was interviewing various hospital personnel and showing off the grounds. We had been watching it for a few minutes when someone kicked in the door and started yelling at us. It was only our friend pulling a prank, and he had a good laugh, until he looked at the film and his jaw dropped. Seems his mom never mentioned she used to work in a mental institution. Story 16. We were kids exploring an underground flood channel. There were spots we could climb up and dangle our arms out of the storm drains on the street, but that required crawling up weird diagonal tunnels. There were 4 of us, maybe 12 years old, 1 flashlight. The walls were all graffiti with a lot of gang stuff, and even warnings to turn back, blah blah blah. We just took it as other kids that were bored. We got to the spot where the ceiling angled down quite low to the point the opening was so small we had to crawl to continue. Challenge accepted. It looked like it opened up again shortly, so we crawled through 5-6 feet of the low area, and when it opened back up, it looked like we were in a large, round concrete pipe before it was square or rectangular. Still, lots of graffiti. We started yelling and playing with the echoes. Then we thought we heard something, so we got quiet. Then a real loud, "You are going to die," came echoing from the darkness. The kid with the flashlight ran so fast, and the rest of us were left in absolute darkness. Anyways, this was the first time we went past the low spot, but the last time we went down there. None of us died that day. The rest of us ended up quietly and slowly walking out in the darkness. Story 17. Me and 2 of my friends were checking out an old fort on the coast. Rumors of it being haunted, and people who do go there all return injured in some fashion, drew us there. It was the middle of the day when we managed to climb into the place, but it was still really still and creepy. So we split up, obviously not learnt from horror movies, and start looking round the courtyard and the battlements, and I find the remnants of a fire. I notice what looks like letters that have been burnt. I pick some of these up, and they piece together to reveal that the recipient of these letters was released from prison for good behavior, but wasn't allowed to see his kids. Then there were increasingly urgent requests for this guy to check in with the authorities. Lastly, separate from the fire, I find a handwritten letter with a rock on top of it to prevent it from blowing away. This seemed to be from this guy's XSO who refused to let him near his kids because what he has done is unforgivable. This is the point where I become increasingly aware that I am alone, and my friends had ventured into the bowels of the fort, which were hollowed out parts of the cliff. So I go into the pitch black of these tunnels, not knowing whether I'm going to bump into my friend or some sort of psychopath. Eventually, I find one of them and explain what I found. We start jumping at every noise before we find my other friend and leg it out of the place. One friend broke 2 toes, the other dislocated his shoulder climbing out, and I have an enormous scar from where my hip was cut open. Very creepy place. Story 18. Kind of late to the party, so I don't expect this to get noticed at all, but whatever. I'm not really an urban explorer, but I did some urban exploring with experienced friends. Since I live in Paris, we decided to go to the Paris Catacombs, not really the best place to start as a newbie. So we had to crawl under tight spaces, walk in water-filled hallways and all that stuff. But honestly, it wasn't bad. We met some other nice people, had lunch, etc. It was a pretty interesting experience since this is such a beautiful and weird place to be at. The horrifying part comes a few days after the exploration. While talking to a friend about what we did, I realized how dangerous and terrifying what we did was. I mean, we were, I don't know how deep underground with no way to contact the emergencies if we got injured or lost, plus the fact that we had to crawl into tight space that could have been blocked when we were exiting the catacombs. We were alone in the dark, in a place that was supposedly not available to the public, and we were totally responsible for what could have happened to us. Just imagine being trapped here, a dark place with no way to contact anyone else outside, forced to wander around maybe until you die. No one can hear you outside, and you can get lost so easily with all the different corridors. It's a goddamn maze in the dark. You also never know who you could meet in these kinds of places. I know it's a different kind of horrifying, and you might call me a coward, but Jesus Christ, I could have died there. I heard stories about people going in there and never coming out. I also heard they found a woman who had gone missing years prior there. She'd probably wandered for days in the dark. God, not a good way to go. You're not a coward. It really is horrifying. Story 19. Kansas man here. My small hometown, 1000, had abandoned grain elevators. The town legend was that something bad happened there, and it was abandoned in a single day, and none of the old people would talk about it. Went in as a young teenager, and sure enough, everything was left untouched. There was stuff in there like people were coming to work the next day, but everything was covered in dust. Family pictures on desks in an office, expensive machinery, nice stuff. It was a very creepy place, and I still don't know why everyone left their things. It has since been opened back up by a new company. Story 20. Okay, I worked in a film factory in Binghamton for a while, and of course, when you're 20 and working a second shift, you get your work done, then you explore. So my friend said he heard about an underground tunnel in a small outbuilding. We got some flashlights and headed in. It wasn't locked, and sure enough, there's stairs going down into the pitch black. Down we go. It was a steam pipe tunnel, very warm. A few minutes later, it turns 90 degrees. We keep following it. Come up in a room full of long-abandoned machinery. Okay, we're going to open the door and see where we are. We're in Narnia. That's the best way to describe it. There are trees and foliage and the night sky, and we're supposed to be in the middle of a city. My friend starts going to the left. I started going to the right. We're talking softly as we go. Then I hear him say, Is that a doghouse? Suddenly barking, loud barking. We hightail it back to the door and slam it. The next day figured out there was a big L-shaped open area around a car repair place the next block over, with chain link keeping people out. The buildings themselves were overgrown with ivy, and there was brush and trees in it, and a dog. Creepy, but also hilarious.